In November of 2021, 23-year-old Tina Tintor was driving home in Las Vegas after taking her golden retriever Max out for a late-night walk when her car was suddenly struck at more than 150 miles per hour by NFL wide receiver Henry Ruggs III, who was heavily intoxicated. The impact sent her Toyota RAV4 up in flames, trapping both Tina and Max inside as bystanders desperately tried but failed to pull them out. Both were killed in the blaze, and Ruggs, who had a BAC more than twice the legal limit, was later sentenced to prison for DUI resulting in death. In 1991, schizophrenic artist Brian Charnley began a project unlike any other. He would paint 17 self-portraits as he gradually stopped taking his medication, documenting his slow descent into psychosis. Each canvas grew more chaotic and fragmented, mirroring his unraveling mind. His final portrait, completed on the very day he took his own life in July of 1991, remains a chilling testament to both his mental illness and artistic talent. In March of 2019, rising Liverpool indie duo Hers were in the middle of their first US tour when tragedy struck. After performing a packed show in Phoenix, 24-year-old Stephen Fitzpatrick and 25-year-old Alden Lauding began their overnight drive to California with their tour manager. Just before 1 a.m., their van was hit head-on by a pickup truck driving the wrong way on Interstate 10. The collision erupted into flames, killing all 4 men instantly. Investigators reported no signs of braking and found an open container in the wrong-way driver's wreckage, suggesting alcohol may have been involved. Just hours earlier, the band had posted that their US tour was going swimmingly and that they were almost home. Their debut album, Invitation to Hers, would become their final record. In 2012, a Pennsylvania tree worker named James Valentine was trimming branches high off the ground when his chainsaw suddenly kicked back. In an instant, the blade plunged deep into his neck and shoulder, stopping just millimeters short of severing vital arteries. Miraculously, the chain jammed before it could spin further, but the saw itself remained embedded in his flesh. First responders found him conscious, with the chainsaw still lodged in place, and carefully stabilized it as he was airlifted to a trauma center. After hours of delicate surgery, doctors successfully removed the saw and repaired the massive tissue damage. Against all odds, Valentine made a full recovery. In 1995, 6-year-old Elisa Izquierdo from Brooklyn became the face of one of the most horrifying child abuse cases in New York history. After years of living safely with relatives, Elisa was placed back in the care of her biological mother, Awilda Lopez, despite repeated warnings from family members and school officials about ongoing abuse and neglect. Almost immediately, neighbors and teachers noticed that Elisa had changed. She often arrived at school bruised, withdrawn, and terrified to go home. Over the next year, Awilda subjected her daughter to relentless cruelty. Elisa was often locked in a dark room for hours, forced to eat scraps or nothing at all, and denied basic care. Witnesses later recalled hearing her cry for help through the walls, while her mother screamed insults and accused her of being evil. She was beaten repeatedly, forced to sleep on the floor, and frequently sent to school with visible marks that no one acted on. In November of 1995, the abuse reached its breaking point. Awilda slammed Elisa's head into a concrete wall, inflicting a massive head injury that caused fatal brain damage, and by the time paramedics arrived, she couldn't be saved. Autopsy findings revealed injuries consistent with chronic physical and sexual abuse, including genital trauma and signs of repeated violation. Awilda was later convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. After serving over 2 decades, she was released in April of 2022, a decision that reignited outrage among those who still remember Elisa's case. Her case horrified New Yorkers not just because of its brutality, but because it was preventable. Teachers, neighbors, and relatives had all tried to report what was happening, yet every warning was ignored. In the aftermath, the city passed Elisa's law, aimed at preventing child welfare agencies from concealing such failures ever again.
Am I being treated like a murderer?
No.
I just lost my face.
Not at all. I know that. And I know this isn't easy for you.
In July of 2024, 34-year-old Arizona father Christopher Schultz left his 2-year-old daughter strapped in her car seat for nearly 3 hours in blistering 109-degree heat while he stayed inside playing video games, drinking beer, and watching porn. He claimed he'd left the air conditioning on in the car, but investigators discovered the car's engine automatically shut off after 30 minutes, cutting the AC long before the child's death. When his wife came home, she found their daughter unresponsive and covered in sweat. It wasn't the first time either. His 2 older daughters later told investigators that he had left them in the car many times before, sometimes for long stretches. His wife had even texted him warnings, writing, "I told you to stop leaving them in the car. How many times have I told you?" That day, after realizing what had happened, Schultz frantically texted her, writing, "Babe, I'm sorry. How could I do this? I killed our baby. This can't be real." She responded in devastation, saying, "We've lost her. She was perfect." Digital evidence revealed that during those same hours, he'd been browsing porn sites and gaming as his daughter slowly roasted outside, what prosecutors later called a grotesque display of neglect and self-absorption. Schultz was charged with first-degree murder and child abuse, though he ultimately accepted a plea to second-degree murder with a 20 to 30-year sentence. Then, in a final twist, he recently took his own life just hours before being booked into prison for his sentence. In 2021, escapologist Jonathan Goodwin attempted one of the most dangerous stunts ever filmed for America's Got Talent Extreme, but it went catastrophically wrong. Suspended in a straitjacket between two swinging cars rigged to explode, the timing malfunctioned and the vehicles slammed together with him still in between before he plummeted more than 30 feet to the ground. The impact severed his spinal cord, shattered both legs and shoulder blades, destroyed a kidney, and left him permanently paralyzed. He was airlifted from the set in critical condition, underwent multiple surgeries, and spent months hospitalized before being discharged in early 2022. Now confined to a wheelchair for life, Goodwin has described the incident as a miracle of survival. The next year, Goodwin filed a lawsuit against NBC Universal and others, accusing them of negligence, inadequate safety protocols, and a production that valued spectacle over human life. The filing claims the stunt was rushed, chaotic, and staffed by a team that lacked the necessary expertise, and that Goodwin will be wheelchair-bound for the rest of his life because of it. Her husband's disgusting secret drove her insane, and what she did next was pure horror. In 2020, 59-year-old Corinna Smith from Cheshire, England, learned that her husband Michael Baines had allegedly been sexually abusing their children for years. Enraged and unable to sleep, she boiled a pot of water, stirred in 3 bags of sugar to make it thicker and stickier, then poured the scalding mixture over him as he lay in bed. The sugar turned the water into a syrup that clung to his skin, causing burns so deep they exposed his flesh. Baines screamed in agony and survived for 5 excruciating weeks before succumbing to his injuries. Smith later told police she simply lost control after finding out what he'd done. She was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 12 years. In February of 2022, 25-year-old Taylor Shabiznis killed her boyfriend in one of Wisconsin's most horrific crimes in modern history. During sex in the basement of his mother's home, she strangled 24-year-old Shad Therian to death after a night of heavy drug use. But what she did next was beyond comprehension. She continued to violate his body for hours, then used knives and a chainsaw to slice him apart, deliberately placing his severed head in a bucket and leaving it in plain view for his mother to find the next morning. When the woman went downstairs, she came face to face with the unimaginable, her son's head staring back at her from inside a blood-filled bucket. Shabiznis later told police they'd have fun trying to find the rest of him. And her violent behavior didn't end there. During a 2023 court hearing, she suddenly lunged at her own attorney, knocking him to the ground before being restrained by deputies. Shabiznis was ultimately sentenced to life in prison without parole. Neil Peart, legendary drummer of the band Rush, lived through a series of devastating personal tragedies. In 1997, his 19-year-old daughter Selena died in a single-car accident while driving to college. Less than a year later, his wife Jackie succumbed to cancer, though Peart later described it as dying of a broken heart. To cope with the losses, he took a 55,000-mile motorcycle journey across North and Central America to cope with his grief. Though he eventually returned to music and remarried, Peart later died in 2020 after a private battle with brain cancer. In 1991, 25-year-old Gregory Green stabbed his pregnant wife to death and spent 16 years behind bars for the crime. After his release, he married the daughter of a pastor who helped him earn parole and started a new family in Michigan. But in 2016, history repeated itself in a scene far more horrifying. Green tied up his wife, shot her 2 children from a previous marriage, then poisoned and suffocated their 2 young daughters, ages 4 and 5. When police arrived, they found his children dead and his wife bound and bleeding in the basement. Green calmly surrendered, telling officers, "I just killed my family." He later pled guilty to 4 counts of murder and was sentenced to 100 years in prison, ensuring he'll never get a second chance again. On Halloween morning in 2025, former TV news anchor Angie Mock was arrested in Wichita, Kansas, after allegedly stabbing her 80-year-old mother Anita to death inside their home. When police arrived, Mock was reportedly covered in blood with cuts all over her hands, while her mother was found deceased in bed with multiple stab wounds. Dispatch audio captured Mock claiming she stabbed her mother to save herself, though no evidence has yet explained what that meant. The once trusted newswoman, who had anchored for Fox 2 St. Louis, is now charged with first-degree murder and held on a $1 million bond. In 1998, Thai pop star Ruangsak Loichasak boarded Thai Airways Flight 261 and took seat 11A. Moments later, the plane crashed, killing 101 people on board, but Ruangsak miraculously survived, earning himself the nickname Iron Bones. Nearly 27 years later, history repeated itself when an Air India flight went down in 2025, and once again, the sole survivor was seated in 11A. Ever since, that seat number has become one of the fastest to sell out, since customers believe it will give them a higher chance of survival if the plane happens to crash. This teenage boy uncovered his father's darkest secret, and it cost him his life. In November of 2012, 13-year-old Dylan Redwine vanished during a court-ordered Thanksgiving visit with his father Mark in the mountains of Colorado. From the start, Mark claimed Dylan simply ran away, but investigators grew suspicious when they found the boy's blood splattered across the living room floor and furniture, with cadaver dogs alerting to the scent of human decomposition inside the home and in Mark's truck. Still without a body, police couldn't arrest him. As the case gained national attention, Mark even appeared on Dr. Phil in 2013, sitting beside his ex-wife and older son to plead his innocence on live TV. But the disturbing truth began to unravel in 2015, when hikers discovered Dylan's partial remains scattered across the woods, while his skull was found miles away with multiple fractures from blunt force trauma. The motive that eventually emerged was almost too grotesque to believe. Dylan had found humiliating photos of his father dressed in women's lingerie and eating feces from a diaper, and told friends he planned to confront him about it. Investigators believe that confrontation happened the night he arrived for Thanksgiving, ending with Dylan being beaten to death, his body dumped in the mountains to hide the evidence. In 2021, nearly a decade after his son went missing, Mark Redwine was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 48 years in prison for killing his own son to silence the disgusting proof of his darkest secrets.